Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to finish the lab and we're going to basically build an auto-scaling group and put this ASG behind an elastic load balancer. Then we're going to do some load testing on our EC2 instances and see if we can get the auto-scaling group to scale up. So join me in the AWS console. Okay, so I'm in the AWS console, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete both my EC2 instances. So I'm going to go in and terminate them. Go ahead and hit yes. And now what we want to do is we want to create an auto-scaling group. So in order to do this, we just go across to auto-scaling groups down here. And the first thing we do is we're going to create a launch configuration. So step one, create launch configuration, then we can create our ASG. So we'll go ahead and hit create. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is go across to our auto-scaling groups. And if you remember from the previous section in EC2, we always create a launch configuration first and then an auto-scaling group. So right now we'll go in and create our launch configurations. So instead of using the Amazon Linux AMI, we're going to use my AMIs. And here is our template WordPress web server. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to do it as a T2 micro. Go ahead and hit next. And what should we call this launch configuration group? Well, we'll just call it WordPress launch config group. And it's really important to remember to apply the S3 role to this launch config group because that is going to enable it to access our code in S3. And then in the advanced details, I'm actually just going to run a little bash script. So it's the same bash script that I used in the last one. It's basically this. So it's the shebang, the path to our interpreter, followed by a yum update. And then we're just going to get the syncing going immediately. So we're going to sync down the contents of our WordPress code from the S3 all the way to our var www.html directory. So I'm just going to put that in, and you can get that code in the resources section of the course. So we'll go ahead and hit next, and we'll leave everything else as standard. We'll select an existing security group, so we're going to launch this inside our web DMZ. And that's basically it. And we'll create our launch config group, use the private key that you want to be able to access it with. And now we're into creating our auto-scaling group. So this is where it gets fun. So the group name, I'm just going to call it WordPress ASG1. So ASG for auto-scaling group. I'm going to start this group with 2 instances. We're going to do it into our default VPC. And in here, it's important to select all the subnets that you want to auto-scale into. So basically, best practice is to select all of them. And then in advanced details, we want to receive traffic from our Elastic Load Balancer. We're going to use the My WordPress Load Balancer. And we're going to run our health checks off the Elastic Load Balancer. So it's going to be looking for that healthy.html. And I'm going to leave everything else as standard. Health check grace period is 300 seconds, so it has to come online within 5 minutes. I'm going to leave that as its default value. And then we're going to use scaling policies to adjust the size of this group. So we want to scale between 2 and let's say 4 instances here. And this will be the minimum and maximum size of your group. So just be aware if you are on free tier, this might cost you a little bit of money, only a few cents likely though. Remember to turn this all off at the end. So what we want to do here is create our auto-scaling group policy. This is a complex one, so you can just create simple. I like to just keep it simple, especially for labs, but you can play around with it later and make more complex ones. So I've just selected simple on both of them. So for the increased group size, we want to create a new alarm. So I'm going to go in and add an alarm, and I'm not going to send a notification. I'm just going to leave SNS out. For now, you can do that if you want, but it's just annoying that you're always getting these emails that something's going on with your auto-scaling group. So we're going to say whenever the average of CPU utilization is greater than or equal to, and I'm going to put in here 60% for at least one consecutive period of, and I'm going to make this 1 minute, then it's going to create an alarm. And this is, I'm just going to write a more friendly human name in here. So we're just going to say CPU above 60%. Go ahead and hit create. And then down here, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to add an alarm. And whenever the average of CPU utilization is less than or equal to, and I'm going to put in here, let's put in here 20% for at least one consecutive period of, and again, we'll just put a minute. And then in here, I'm going to write a human-friendly name. So CPU less than 20%. And we're not going to have a notification, and so go ahead and hit create alarm. And so it says take the action, we're going to add one instance, and then take the action, we're going to remove one instance. So there we go. If you read here very carefully, CPU utilization is greater than or equal to 60 for 60 seconds, and CPU utilization is less than or equal to 20 for 20 seconds. Okay, so that's it. We'll go ahead and hit next to configure our notifications. I hate notifications, so I'm just going to leave this off. You can add your own notifications in there if you want. And then we're going to go ahead and hit next, configure tags. So we're just going to say name, and this will be WordPress ASG web. And go ahead and hit create. And then we're going to create our auto-scaling group. Okay, so it is running and is now going to create our EC2 instances. So if we go back over to our EC2 dashboard and we click in here, it says 0 running instances currently. Just refresh this. And so here we go. We've got our 2 new instances that are being provisioned. And I'm just going to pause the video and wait for these to come online. Another thing to also just check is your load balancer and go into your instances. So right now there are no instances assigned to this load balancer, but that will change when your EC2 instances come online. So I'm just going to pause the video and wait for these to come online now. Okay, so a couple of minutes has passed and I have my new web server that's been provisioned. So it's just initializing now. So that's great. That has definitely worked. We can also go in and simulate a failover on RDS. So we can go into RDS, and because we have multi-AZ turned on, what we can do is click in here. We can go to our instance actions, and we can just basically hit reboot, and then that will simulate a failure. So it should fail over to our, our secondary availability zone. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And so if you just click the reboot with failover, it is actually simulating a failover from one site to another, which is what we want to simulate. So I'm going to go ahead and hit reboot. And so now let's go ahead and go to our WordPress site, so aforce.guru. I'm just going to refresh it. Okay, so it did refresh. I'll be honest with you guys, it did take about 20 seconds, or it hung for about 20 seconds. So, it's not 100% perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than having to wait half an hour, an hour, or 4 hours, depending on which managed service provider that you choose. So we had a little bit of outage. It was just hanging, basically. I never got a could not connect. In any case, it's still amazing technology if you think about it. I mean, this site itself would cost us maybe less than $10 a month, and it's fully fault tolerant. So if we lost an availability zone, your users might have trouble using the site for about 10 or 15 seconds, and then it's back up. That's pretty amazing technology. When I worked in IT, a lot of the managed service providers I worked for, we would guarantee like a 4-hour recovery time objective and only a half hour's worth of data loss. And now with AWS, it's just you're not going to lose much data, if any at all, if you architect it correctly, and your outages are going to be in less than a minute. If you lost an availability zone, you think about that. That is amazing, especially for what it costs. I mean, we're talking about dollars per month. So the last thing we're going to go do is going to test stress on our EC2 instances. So I'll go back over here, and we'll go over to EC2. We'll just see that our EC2 instances are still running. So we've got our 2 here. I'm going to pick this one, and I'm going to log into it. And what I'm going to then do is I'm going to run a stress tool that we installed in our first Bootstrap script. So if we go across over here and have a look, it was called Stress. So Stress is actually a little program. It's sort of deprecated now, but it's just easy to install on Linux. It's created by Harvard, and it allows you to stress out your CPUs. So what I'm going to do now is log into that EC2 instance. Okay, so I'm going to connect to my EC2 instance. I'm going to type in yes. Going to elevate my privileges to root. I'm going to clear the screen. And to use Stress, all we need to do is type in stress and then CPU, and then how many basically processes we want our CPU to run. So I'm going to type in 100, and this is going to stress the hell out of our CPU. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back over to our EC2 console, and I'm going to see if our auto-scaling group decides to increase the number of EC2 instances automatically. So here I am in the EC2 console. I've just selected the EC2 image that I'm running the stress test on, and you can see the CPU utilization here has gone down. So what I'm going to do now is just pause the video, probably let this run for about 10 minutes, and I'll just keep an eye on the console, and hopefully we will see a new EC2 instance being provisioned as a result of this stress. Okay, so that took about probably 5 or 6 minutes. I had a quick read of the news, and here we go. We can see that it is beginning to provision a new instance. If we click on our instance that we are running that load test on, and we go to our monitoring, we should be able to see here, massive spikes gone up to 100% CPU. So now it has, Autoscaling has detected that, and now it's provisioning a new instance. So that's really it for this lecture, guys. For some homework, you could probably try and create this so that you get regional fault tolerance, not just multiple availability fault tolerance. See if you can figure out a way to do that, and maybe write a little blog on it or post it to our discussion forums. But yeah, you can see the power of AWS. It's just amazing. You can, for very little cost, you can have a fully fault tolerant website up in the cloud, and you can simulate failovers. You can go in and delete instances. You can reboot your database servers. The amount of downtime that you're going to have is going to be, less than 60 seconds. So it just blows my mind every single time I think about it. We're going to do one more lecture, and I'm going to show you how we can basically automate the hell out of this. So we learn about Bootstrap scripts. Bootstrap scripts are run at root level, commands that are run at root level when your EC2 instances first boot up. Now I'm going to show you CloudFormation, and CloudFormation is just like bootstrapping, but for all of AWS, or for all of the AWS resources that CloudFormation support. So in the next lecture, we're going to run a CloudFormation template that's been provided to us by Amazon that's going to create a WordPress site that is completely redundant, and we're going to provision this in a completely different region from where you have been doing these labs in, just so we can see it all work. And you'll see how much time it saves you. I mean, we've spent almost an hour setting this entire environment up, and using CloudFormation, we can do it in a couple of minutes. So join me in the next lecture. Thank you.